The Private School Transport Association. A lot of news and misconceptions have been floating around. In recent media reports, we have seen stories that say the Ministry of Education owes school bus drivers for their services. Are these bus drivers part of the Private School Transport Association? How are they different? To answer some of those questions, we have the PRO of the Private School Transport Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Ndali Young. Welcome.
Welcome.
I understand that you just came off of a plane, so we're very honored to have you here this morning.
I just kind of came straight into the studio.
Yeah.
So please apologize.
Oh no, we're very glad to have you because we have these incidents that we need to, these reports that we'd like to rectify.
Definitely.
So what is the situation now, and how has this mix-up affected the association, parents of students, and even bus drivers?
So let me start first by saying that the Private School Transport Association is actually the premier school transport in the country. The reason why we say premier is because in order for you to become a school bus driver, there are a number of things that you have to do, you have to accomplish before you get there. So you have to have your first aid, you have to do your defensive driving, you have to get certification from the ministry, not to mention even the bus that you drive, it has to be painted in yellow. It's nice big yellow color with school marked at the side.
Lovely yellow color. Yeah.
Right.
Mustard, yeah.
So the reason for that is that, some time ago, the government of the day noticed that there were a lot of incidents with maxi taxis and so on and so forth, and we were having problems with having the school transport and incidents with different, whether it be, misdemeanors with young ladies or so on and so forth, and they brought to bear that there should be a transport specifically for schools. Having said that, that's why the bus is yellow. So you see, if you see a yellow bus parked, maybe by the river, you would want to know why a school bus is parked there. So the school transport was brought in at that point in time, probably about 10 years ago, was brought into the fray. And since then, we have built ourselves to be just about 280 something. I think we have about 314 drivers by now across the country. And one of the issues that we've been finding is that the Maxi Taxi Association does school transport for government schools. We are not engaged by the government as yet, and it's something that we're working on with the minister. But every time someone says the school buses, the image that is put out on the television is usually the image of a yellow bus. As a matter of fact, we've signed MOUs with NGC and Diamond Motors and so on and so forth, and up to this one, I think it's Monday past, there were images of that MOU being signed with Diamond Motors appearing on the TV screens, and that has created a bit of a uproar within our our customers, which are our parents, because they're saying, if we're paid by the government, why are they paying the fees that they're paying? So we are totally private for now, but we have tabled to the government that we can help to solve the situation that they're having with the school transport, because first and foremost, we are better fitted to transport, but we don't want to, there's not a competition between the Maxi Taxi Association and private school. We are saying that where we can help, we will, because we're already transporting school children. Not to mention the issues of having, how do you now know who was transported? So one of the issues that they have raised, or the government has raised, is that in transporting of the school children, they have alleged that some maxi taxis may be driving without people or doing what they call ghost maxi taxis. So they're not really delivering anybody, but they just write on people that they did X, Y, Z. And this is to cast no aspersions on anyone. But what we are saying is, let me just say, do you use Uber?
I've never used it.
Never used it, okay. So if you use something like a private taxi or Uber service, you're going to have to pay for the entire service to go from point A to point B. But if you use a public service, one of the benefits is a lower cost, primarily because they're already on that route. What we have said, both to our parents and to stakeholders and to the government and to the wider Trinidad, is that we are already in the business of school transport. So therefore, it's not necessary to have the entire transport paid for. You can have each child paid for on an individualistic basis, and it would remove some of the stigmatism of having what they call ghost maxi taxis, where you pay for an entire bus and it doesn't do anything for the day. However, they're charging for that day. So that's one of the solutions we have proffered to come in and to provide somewhat of a solution to this problem that's continually coming up in the news, and you're hearing mentions of school drivers making noise for their money, and the government is saying that they're doing the audits. But all we want to do is to make sure it's not confused between the yellow buses that are official school buses, although we are not official to the ministry, but we have official school buses in terms of the requirements, and the bus on the side is marked school bus, as opposed to the PTSC engaging the Maxi Taxi Association to do school transport. So we've also reached out to the Maxi Taxi Association to do. We've also reached out to the PTSC that we engage them to bring solutions to this problem that's continuously, coming up from time to time, especially when school is about to close or about to reopen. It becomes a head.
I'd also like to talk about how the mix-up has affected the association and even the parents of students using this system.
One of the major, especially in rural areas, that's where the major issue is, because you would understand in our rural areas is where the poverty line comes down a bit, and every dollar counts. So oftentimes when parents, they're paying for the service, it's because they're attempting to get a better job or to make better in their lives. They may not be a housewife, so they can't go and deliver the child to school. So they would implore the buses. So it's a necessary service, but most times to them, it's a service that they wish could be free, because the reality of it is it's hard. It's already hard. It's not a necessity, but in order to get the job that they want to get, or even if they're working in maybe a town, so they may be working in San Fernando but living in Pinal or living in DB, and you would have that school transport deliver the child instead of you getting to work late. Mm-hmm. What that has caused now is a lot of parents asking and the uproar of, if it is that you're being paid by the government, why not, as I said earlier on? But moreover, to our school bus network, you have to understand that it's a very ticklish, it's a very ticklish job to perform. I'll tell you why in a nutshell. One of the issues is that when you become a school driver, a lot of people do it out of the love for children. It's not really business first, because you have to bear in mind that school goes on vacation for 2 months in a year. So for those 2 months, you're not making any money. So if you purchase a new bus, although we do have undertakings from Diamond Motors and from other financial institutions to restructure the payments according to, so we're working on that now, the payments according to our school year. But when you have a regular loan that you have to pay every month, and for 2 months you have no income, every dollar counts. So you're a school bus driver, you have 10 or 12 students, your max or your bus can take 15, and you're going about the way. Every time a student is awarded a free transport, that student is actually removed from a school bus and put onto a maxi taxi school bus. And that action sometimes can be devastating to the driver. Okay. So every time you award, so what we have engaged is, instead of having the child removed from the school bus, if we were engaged, it would simply mean that the government will indicate which child they're paying for and which child they would present that grant. So then the driver would then have some children on the bus that they would have to receive that finance directly for, and some may have a government grant, according to the circumstance. So that's really where the effect is felt the most.
We'd like to take a short break for the news, and we'd like to continue with this conversation, of course, focusing on what you mentioned earlier, drivers doing it for the love of it. Also, we'd like to talk a little bit about how you assess these drivers. How do you maintain safety and security? Because you said sometimes you see a bus parked up by the river. So how do you work around these issues? So we'll be continuing this conversation with the PRO of the Private School Transport Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Ndale Young, of course, just after the news. So we take a short break for the news. Joining us as we continue this conversation, we have the PRO of the Private School Transportation Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Ndale Young. And Mr. Young, some of the last points that we would have discussed in the segment just before the newscast, we were talking about drivers doing it for the love of it, and also the assessment that they would have to undergo before they are selected to be part of your organization. What does that assessment entail?
Well, to take the first part of the question, the nexus of this organization would have simply been, most times, if you go through most drivers that are in it more than 20 years, would have been a parent or maybe a housewife or even husband starting with their vehicle to drop other children to school. They got a bigger vehicle, they started to charge, they moved up to a maxi taxi. This is when we were still informal. Moving into 2018, we now have in the midst those drivers that are still there, but it's now become an industry. So there are now people, it's now a viable industry where people purchase buses to do school transport specifically as a means of income, and not just as, you know, for love of industry, or not primarily for love of industry. But whether, you know, fish or fowl, both must go through the rigors of having a number of requirements, as I said before. One of those, each driver required to have a police certificate of character every 3 months. Now, this has also created a little bit of an issue, because we have, you know, lobbied to have this change to maybe a school term or every half of a year, because there's also issues with getting the certificate of character. You may take a month and a half to get that certificate of character, and by the time you get it, it becomes invalid, because we have to also have a certification from the Ministry of Transport every 3 months as well. So you're talking about having a certificate of character, you're talking about having a first aid, you have to be first aid certified, defensive driving, then your regular taxi license and so on and so forth, and your vehicle being H. And if you were to have a bus, the additional, it's probably going to cost you about $10,000–11,000 to paint over the bus in yellow. So simply to comply, the rigors are there, and we agree with it and we comply with it, because it's people's children that you're talking about. So now it's a little bit counterproductive when we take those school children and we put them on a maxi taxi that simply has to have, I guess, the license to drive and the ban. So, you know, and again, it's no shot to them, but I'm saying that in this industry, we have done it. Most of the drivers have been doing it for over 20 years. So we have the pedigree, we also have the requirements, and all we're saying is that we're at the table now, we're at the point now where the people who are entering really want to be able to have it as lucrative as possible while performing all the requirements moving forward.
Let's talk about transparency and accountability. How do you ensure that this is on par?
Well, the thing about it is each driver makes an arrangement with the parent. We have a template from the association. So the association is simply an NGO. We don't govern, but we do have the ability to recommend, at least to the Transport Association. So we have the ability to recommend if drivers are not performing within the association. There is a disciplinary tribunal. So if we have drivers with any issue, if someone may have a complaint, which is really few and far between, with a driver driving, they may think them to be under the influence of alcohol or any issue with anyone of the children, the tribunal then kicks in and takes a complaint from the parent, and then would, after full investigation, would make the necessary recommendation to the government, to the Ministry of Transportation. And then they would decide from there whether whatever, we don't have the ability to scold, but we can recommend. We can say this is an issue that we have come across and we ask that you look into it. And at the very worst case, you have the ability to remove that driver from the system. So there is also accountability, at least where the school transport is, the private school transport is concerned. In the public sector, I can't tell you.
Okay. You mentioned also that there are approximately 314 drivers.
Yeah, we're just about 314, and I know we probably 10 or 12 more will come on this within this month. And because of the MOUs that we have signed with both the Rampasad and Diamond Motors, as fast as we have, and we also signed, I must say, we have also signed an MOU with NGC. So because of that fusing, most of the new buses that we put out, or that we encourage people to purchase, that we get as a special price are actually CNG buses. So it's clean for the environment, it's safe for the children,
Okay.
and it's the drivers have the benefit of having it at an awesome cost. And we do have an MOU with NCC that they provide us with free CNG up until the end of 2018. So the faster drivers come on, is the more they have access to that grant.
Great. As we get ready to close this interview, I'd just like you to reiterate your main point this morning and closing comments.
All right. So the main point is simply, we are the private school transport association. Some people affectionately call us the yellow buses. So what we're saying is the media just need to get it right. Please stop putting our images up when you're talking about school transport from PTSC. And moreover, moving forward, that parents should feel safe to engage. If you see a yellow bus anywhere, take the number, go on the Facebook page, send us the number, and let us know you want to get your child on that bus, because it's safe. And our motto is from home to the school, safe and on time. And I must say that the reason we call ourselves the premier transport, school transport for now drops children off at a hub. We have issues at the home, issues that sometimes you can curtail that issue by picking a child up at the home. But more importantly, a lot of these after-school fights that you see doesn't involve our children, simply because by the time the bell is rung, we've picked them up and they're on the way home. By the time you see all these commotion going on after school, they're on the way home. So it's from school to the home.
Straight to their house.
Yes.
That's great. Well, we've been chatting with the PRO of the Private School Transportation Association of Trinidad and Tobago, Mr. Ndali Young. It's definitely a pleasure chatting with you. Thank you for making the time to be here. We take a short break. A lot more when we return.